The screams of terrified horses filled the air as flames licked at the barn's wooden beams, casting a hellish orange glow across the Montana Territory ranch. Millicent Hayes stumbled backward, choking on the thick smoke that billowed around her, the hem of her calico dress already singed from the rapidly spreading fire. She had come to collect eggs before dawn, only to discover the barn ablaze and the horses trapped inside. Trying to free them had been foolish, but she couldn't bear their panicked whinnies. Now the entrance had collapsed behind her, and death seemed certain as flames encircled her from all sides. Montana Territory, 1876, was unforgiving to those who made mistakes, and Millicent feared she had just made her last one. "Hello, is anyone in there?" A deep voice called out, barely audible over the roaring fire. "Here," Millicent cried, her voice breaking as smoke filled her lungs. "I'm trapped." The eastern wall of the barn groaned and splintered as an axe broke through, creating a jagged opening. Through the flames and smoke emerged a broad-shouldered figure, a bandana pulled up over his nose and mouth, his hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the intense heat. "Take my hand," the stranger commanded, reaching through a momentary break in the flames. Millicent hesitated only a second before grasping his gloved hand. With a powerful tug, he pulled her toward the opening, but a burning beam crashed down between them. She screamed as sparks showered her hair and shoulders. "Hold on!" In one fluid motion, the man leaped through the flames, scooped her into his arms, and charged back toward the opening. Millicent buried her face against his chest as he carried her through the inferno, the heat searing her skin even through her clothes. They burst into the cool morning air, the man still running with her in his arms until they reached a safe distance. Behind them, the barn collapsed with a deafening crash, sending a plume of embers into the dawn sky. "The horses," Millicent gasped between coughs as he set her down gently. "Got most of them out before I heard you," he replied, pulling down his bandana to reveal a soot-streaked face and concerned blue eyes. "Are you hurt, miss?" "Just some burns, I think," she managed, taking in her rescuer for the first time. He was tall and weathered, with a strong jawline shadowed by several days' growth of beard. His clothes marked him as a cowboy worn leather chaps, dusty boots with spurs, and a denim shirt beneath a leather vest. "Name's Finnian Calloway," he said, offering her a canteen of water. "Was passing by when I saw the smoke." "Millicent Hayes," she replied, taking a grateful sip. "My father's ranch. He's away in Helena on business." She looked back at the smoldering ruins. What could have caused this? Finnian's expression darkened. "Wasn't no accident, Miss Hayes." "Saw tracks leading away. Someone set this fire deliberately." Millicent felt her blood run cold. "But who would want to?" "Hayes," Finnian interrupted, his brow furrowing. "Your father wouldn't be Thomas Hayes, would he?" She nodded, suddenly wary. "Been hearing talk in town. Some folk claiming your father's land blocks access to the river. Cattle baron named Whitaker's been making noise about it." Millicent's hands trembled as she clutched the canteen. "Jeremiah Whitaker has been trying to buy our land for months. Father refused to sell." "Well, seems like he's done with asking nice." Finnian helped her to her feet. "You got somewhere safe to stay. This might not be the end of it." Before she could answer, several ranch hands came running from the main house, having finally noticed the blaze. Among them was Edgar, her father's foreman. "Miss Millicent," Edgar called, his eyes wide with shock. "Thank the Lord you're alive." As the men organized to prevent the fire from spreading to other buildings, Millicent found herself watching Finnian. There was something about his easy confidence, and the way he immediately began directing the ranch hands that impressed her. He wasn't just a passing cowboy, he knew ranching. "We need to send for my father," Millicent told Edgar once the immediate crisis had passed. The barn was a total loss, but they'd saved the house and other outbuildings. "Telegraph office doesn't open till noon," Edgar replied. "And with your father 2 days' ride away in Helena, it'll be near a week before he can get back." Finnian, who had been examining the ground around the barn, approached them. "Miss Hayes, those tracks I mentioned, they lead east toward Whitaker's property. I'd bet my best horse it was his men." Edgar nodded grimly. "Wouldn't put it past that snake. Been threatening to dam up the creek that runs through his property to our grazing lands if Mr. Hayes don't sell." Millicent squared her shoulders, ignoring the pain from her minor burns. "Then we need proof. If Whitaker thinks he can intimidate us while father is away, he's sorely mistaken." Finian's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "That's mighty brave talk, Miss Hayes, but these men play rough. Without your father here, you're vulnerable." "I've lived in Montana territory my whole life, Mr. Calloway. I'm no stranger to hardship." She met his gaze directly. "But I would appreciate your help if you're willing." For a moment, Finnian just studied her, taking in her soot-stained face, singed hair, and the determined set of her jaw. Finally, he nodded. "I've got business in Helena myself, but it can wait. I'll stay on a few days, help sort this out." That evening, after Millicent had bathed and changed, she found Finnian on the porch of the main house, cleaning his revolver by lamplight. She brought him a plate of food and sat beside him. "I never properly thanked you," she said quietly, "for saving my life." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Any decent man would have done the same, perhaps, but not every man would stay to help afterward. She studied his profile in the dim light. "What takes you to Helena, if you don't mind my asking?" Finnian hesitated, then holstered his cleaned weapon. "Looking for work. Been riding with a cattle outfit from Wyoming, but the trail's getting crowded these days. Thought I might try my hand at something else. You don't strike me as a drifter, Mr. Calloway." He chuckled, the sound surprisingly warm. "No, what do I strike you as then? A man with a past," she replied simply. "One he's not running from, but not exactly embracing either." Finnian's smile faded. "You've got sharp eyes, Miss Hayes." "Millicent," she corrected. "After carrying someone through fire, I think first names are warranted." "Millicent," he repeated, the name soft on his lips. "Then you should call me Finn." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the distant chorus of crickets and the occasional lowing of cattle the only sounds. "Tomorrow I'll ride out, follow those tracks," Finn finally said. "See if I can find anything linking Whitaker to the fire." "I'm going with you," Millicent declared. "That's not wise. It's my family's ranch, Mr. Calloway Finn. I won't sit idle while someone tries to burn us out." Finn looked like he wanted to argue, but instead just shook his head with a slight smile. "Stubborn as a Missouri mule, aren't you?" "I prefer determined," she replied with a hint of mischief. "And I'm an excellent rider." The next morning they set out at first light. Millicent rode her favorite mare, a spirited chestnut named Penny, while Finn mounted his muscular bay gelding. Edgar and 2 other hands stayed behind to guard the ranch and begin clearing the barn's remains. "Tracks are still clear," Finn noted as they followed the trail eastward. 3 riders. They weren't particularly concerned about hiding their path. "Whitaker's men aren't known for subtlety," Millicent replied, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat against the rising sun. "His foreman, Silas Burke, is especially nasty, used to be an enforcer for the railroads back east." They rode for nearly 2 hours, crossing into Whitaker territory. The land changed subtly, more open range, fewer trees and rockier soil. As they crested a small rise, Finn suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. "Riders coming," he murmured, pointing to a dust cloud in the distance. Millicent felt her heart quicken. "Should we hide?" "Too late for that. They've spotted us." Finn's hand rested casually near his holster. "Follow my lead, but if there's trouble, you ride hard back to your ranch. Don't look back." Before she could protest, 3 horsemen approached, spreading out in a way that made Millicent instinctively nervous. She recognized the center rider immediately, Silas Burke, a bear of a man with a permanent scowl and a reputation for cruelty. "Well, well," Burke drawled, his eyes cold as he took in Millicent. "Miss Hayes, ain't you a sight? Heard you had some trouble at your place. Terrible shame about that barn." "Wasn't much of a shame," Finn replied evenly. "More like deliberate arson." Burke's gaze shifted to Finn, sizing him up. "Don't believe I know you, stranger. Finnian Calloway. I'm working for the Hayes family now." "That's so." Burke's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Whitaker don't recall hiring any new hands." "Didn't say I was working for Whitaker," Finn replied, his tone deceptively mild. The tension crackled between them. Millicent spoke up. "We're just out for a morning ride, Mr. Burke. Thought we'd check our property boundaries, what with all the misunderstandings lately." Burke chuckled, a sound like gravel. "Boundaries are clear enough, Miss Hayes. Your pa's the one being stubborn about natural water access. Mr. Whitaker's made fair offers." "Fair?" Millicent felt her temper rising. "Offering half the market value while threatening to cut off our water is hardly fair." "Business is business," Burke shrugged. "And with the railroad coming through, land values are changing. Your pa might want to reconsider, especially after recent events." Finn subtly shifted his horse, placing himself more directly between Millicent and Burke. "Sounds an awful lot like you're admitting to burning down that barn." One of Burke's companions, a wiry man with a pockmarked face, reached for his gun, but Burke raised a hand to stop him. "Just offering friendly advice," Burke said. "These parts can be dangerous for a young woman alone." "She's not alone," Finn stated, his voice like steel. Burke considered them both for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, you best head back to Hayes' property. You're trespassing now, and Mr. Whitaker ain't as tolerant as me." He tipped his hat mockingly to Millicent. "Give your pa my regards when he returns." As the 3 men rode away, Millicent released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That man makes my skin crawl." "For good reason," Finn agreed, watching the retreating riders. "He all but confessed to the fire. But we still don't have proof." "No," Finn admitted. "But I did notice something interesting while he was talking. The man on the right, his boots have a distinctive spur mark. Saw the same pattern in the tracks leading from your barn." Millicent's eyes widened. "That's something at least. Not enough for the law, but it confirms what we suspected." Finn turned his horse back toward Hayes' land. "Let's head back. I don't like being out in the open with those 3 knowing where we are." They rode in silence for a while, both lost in thought. Millicent found herself studying Finn's profile against the big Montana sky, wondering about the man who had so suddenly entered her life. There was a gravity to him, a sense of purpose that went beyond his current circumstances. "You said you're looking for different work," she ventured eventually. "What did you do before cattle driving?" Finn was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "Was a lawman for a while," he finally said. "Deputy sheriff in a Colorado mining town. Before that, rode with the Union cavalry in the war." "What happened with the sheriff job?" His jaw tightened. "Town got taken over by a mining company. Sheriff started taking their money to look the other way. I wouldn't. Things ended badly." Millicent sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. "And now you're headed to Helena." "Heard the territorial governor's office is hiring men with law experience. Thought I might try for a marshal's badge." He glanced at her, a half-smile softening his features. "Though at the moment, I seem to be sidetracked playing ranch hand." "A fortuitous detour, at least for me," Millicent replied softly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the connection that had formed in the short time they'd known each other. The moment was broken by a distant gunshot. Finn reacted instantly, spurring his horse forward and reaching to pull Millicent's mare alongside his. "Ride," he commanded, and they galloped toward the Hayes ranch, the sound of more gunfire driving them forward. They crested the final hill to see smoke rising again, this time from one of the corrals. Edgar and the other hands were exchanging fire with riders who were attempting to drive off the Hayes cattle. "Stay back," Finn ordered Millicent as he drew his revolver. But Millicent had already pulled her father's rifle from its scabbard on her saddle. "This is my ranch," she said fiercely. "I won't hide." Before he could argue, she urged Penny forward, taking cover behind a large boulder overlooking the scene. From there, she aimed carefully and fired a warning shot that kicked up dirt near one of the rustlers. Finn muttered something under his breath but joined her, his expert shots driving back two of the attackers. The rustlers, realizing they were now caught in a crossfire, began to retreat, abandoning their attempt to scatter the cattle. As suddenly as it had begun, the skirmish was over. The rustlers disappeared over the eastern ridge, leaving behind only dust and one wounded man whom Edgar had managed to unseat from his horse. Millicent and Finn rode down to join the ranch hands. The wounded rustler lay groaning, clutching a bleeding shoulder. "Recognize him?" Finn asked Edgar. The foreman nodded grimly. "Works for Whitaker all right, name's Jessup." Finn dismounted and knelt beside the wounded man. "Your boss isn't very subtle, is he? First arson, now daylight cattle rustling." Jessup glared but said nothing. "We need to get word to the sheriff," Millicent said, her rifle still ready. "This has gone beyond intimidation." "Sheriff's 2 days' ride away in the county seat," Edgar reminded her, "and he's in Whitaker's pocket anyway." Finn stood up, his expression resolute. "I'll ride to Helena tomorrow. Bring back your father and maybe someone from the territorial marshal's office. This needs to end before someone gets killed." Millicent felt a chill at his words. The thought of Finn leaving, even temporarily, left her with an unexpected sense of loss. In just 2 days, his presence had become something she relied on. "I should go with you," she suggested. Finn shook his head. "Too dangerous, and your people need you here." His eyes softened as he looked at her. "I'll return as quickly as I can." That evening, after they had secured the wounded rustler and reinforced the ranch's defenses, Millicent found Finn once again on the porch. This time he was writing in a small, worn journal. "Letters?" she asked, sitting beside him. He closed the journal. "Just thoughts. Old habit from the war." They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky, painting the mountains purple against the horizon. "Thank you," Millicent said finally. "Not just for saving me from the fire, but for staying, for helping." Finn turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. "I've been thinking about what you said about me having a past I'm neither running from nor embracing. And you're right. After the war, after losing my position as deputy, I've been drifting. Taking odd jobs, moving on when things got complicated." He looked out toward the darkened landscape. "But some things are worth complicating your life for." The way he said it, the way his eyes returned to hers, made Millicent's heart beat faster. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. "Be careful on the ride to Helena," she said softly. "Whitaker might try to stop you." Finn turned his hand to clasp hers. "I've faced worse odds." "Have you?" she asked, suddenly curious about the depths of this man who had appeared like an answered prayer in her moment of greatest need. "During the war, my unit was surrounded at Shiloh, fought our way out against all reason." His thumb traced small circles on her hand. Later, as a deputy, I once faced down 5 claim jumpers with just my revolver and a broken bottle. You're either very brave or very foolish, Millicent observed with a small smile. Most days, it's a fine line between the two. He hesitated, then added, "What about you? What's your story, Millicent Hayes? How does a young woman end up running a ranch in Montana territory? My mother died when I was 12. It's been just father and me since then. He taught me everything about ranching, said there was no point in raising a helpless daughter in a place like this." She smiled at the memory. "I can rope, ride, and shoot as well as any man on this ranch." "I've noticed," Finn replied, amusement warming his voice. "You're quite remarkable." Their conversation continued late into the night, sharing stories of their lives, discovering common ground despite their different paths. Millicent found herself drawn to his quiet strength, his principles, and the gentle way he listened when she spoke. By the time they said goodnight, something had shifted between them, a recognition of feelings neither had expected to find. Dawn came too quickly. Finn prepared for the journey to Helena, packing provisions and checking his weapons. Millicent insisted on providing him with her father's best horse, a sturdy black stallion named Thunder who knew the trail to Helena well. 2 days there, a day to find your father and convince the marshal, then 2 days back, Finn calculated as he tightened the saddle. 5 days if all goes well. And if Whitaker's men try to stop you, Millicent couldn't keep the worry from her voice. Then it might take 6, he replied with a grim smile. More seriously, he added, "Stay vigilant while I'm gone, keep the men close to the house. No one rides alone." Edgar approached, leading his own horse. "I'm riding with Mr. Calloway to the county line," he informed Millicent, "just to be safe." Millicent nodded, grateful for Edgar's foresight. As the men prepared to depart, she impulsively reached into her pocket and withdrew a small silver locket, her mother's, one of the few possessions she treasured above all else. "Take this," she said, pressing it into Finn's hand. "For luck." Finn looked down at the delicate piece, clearly understanding its significance. "I'll keep it safe," he promised, tucking it carefully into his shirt pocket close to his heart. Their goodbye was brief but charged with unspoken emotion. As she watched him ride away, Millicent felt a strange certainty that her life had changed irrevocably the moment Finnian Calloway had carried her through those flames. The next 3 days passed in a state of tense vigilance. Millicent organized the remaining hands into round-the-clock watches, moved the cattle to the pastures closest to the house, and kept her father's rifle within reach at all times. The wounded rustler, Jessup, was kept under guard in the tack room, his injury tended to but his mobility restricted. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Millicent was checking the vegetable garden when a rider approached from the west, not the direction of Helena. She recognized Burke's second-in-command, the pockmarked man they had encountered on their ride. "Miss Hayes," he called, staying a respectful distance from the house where 2 ranch hands had their rifles trained on him. "Mr. Whitaker requests your presence at his home. Seems your cowboy friend never made it to Helena." Millicent felt ice form in her veins. "What have you done to him?" The man smiled unpleasantly. "Nothing yet, but Mr. Whitaker thought you might want to discuss terms for his release in person today. And if I refuse, then I reckon your friend might have an unfortunate accident. Dangerous territory, Montana." He tipped his hat. "Mr. Whitaker expects you by sundown. Come alone or don't bother coming at all." With that, he wheeled his horse around and galloped away. The ranch hands immediately protested when Millicent announced her intention to go. "It's clearly a trap, Miss Millicent," insisted Samuel, the oldest hand. "They'll have both of you then." "And if I don't go, they'll kill Finn," she replied, her mind racing. "I have to try." In the end, they devised a plan. Millicent would go to Whitaker's ranch, but two of the hands would follow at a distance, armed and ready to intervene if necessary. If she didn't return by midnight, they would ride for the sheriff, regardless of his allegiances. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Millicent mounted Penny and set out for the Whitaker ranch. She wore her plainest riding skirt and jacket, but had a small derringer concealed in her boot, a precaution her father had insisted upon for years. Whitaker's sprawling ranch house came into view just as the sun touched the horizon. Unlike the practical, modest Hayes homestead, Jeremiah Whitaker's residence was an ostentatious display of wealth, a two-story affair with wide verandas and ornate woodwork, more suited to St. Louis than the Montana frontier. Burke met her at the entrance, his massive frame blocking the doorway. "You'll have to surrender any weapons, Miss Hayes." "I'm not carrying any," she lied smoothly, knowing they wouldn't search a lady too thoroughly. Burke's skeptical expression suggested he didn't believe her, but he merely grunted and led her inside to a lavishly appointed study where Jeremiah Whitaker sat behind an enormous oak desk. He was a corpulent man in his 50s, with small eyes that gleamed with cunning and a carefully waxed mustache that seemed at odds with his frontier surroundings. "Miss Hayes," he greeted her with false joviality, "how kind of you to accept my invitation. Where is he?" Millicent demanded, dispensing with pleasantries. Whitaker's smile thinned. "Your concern for your employee is touching. Rest assured Mr. Calloway is unharmed for now." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. We have business to discuss." Millicent remained standing. "I want to see him first." After a tense moment, Whitaker nodded to Burke, who left the room briefly. When he returned, he shoved Finn ahead of him. Millicent's heart leaped at the sight of him alive, but with a bruised face and his hands bound behind his back. "Millicent," Finn's voice was rough, "you shouldn't have come." "Touching reunion," Whitaker interrupted. "Now, Miss Hayes, let's discuss the real issue. Your father's land, specifically the water rights. I have papers here ready for your signature." "My father is the only one who can sign over property," Millicent replied coldly. "True," Whitaker conceded. "But you can sign an intent to sell, which will suffice until his return, and in exchange—" He nodded toward Finn. "Your friend here walks free." Millicent met Finn's gaze, saw the almost imperceptible shake of his head. "And if I refuse?" Whitaker's pretense at civility evaporated. "Then we'll see how brave your cowboy remains after a few days in my root cellar. Montana nights get mighty cold this time of year." The negotiations continued, with Whitaker laying out increasingly dire consequences for refusal. Throughout it all, Millicent stalled, knowing her ranch hands would be moving into position outside. Finally, feigning defeat, she approached the desk. "Let me see these papers." As Whitaker eagerly pushed the documents toward her, the sound of breaking glass came from somewhere in the house, followed by shouting. Burke drew his gun, but before he could react, Finn had somehow worked his bound hands to the front of his body and launched himself at the bigger man. Chaos erupted. Millicent pulled her derringer and aimed it at Whitaker, who was reaching for a shotgun behind his desk. "Don't," she warned, her hand steady. Outside, more gunfire erupted as her ranch hands engaged with Whitaker's men. Finn had managed to overcome Burke and was now freeing his hands with a letter opener from the desk. "We need to go," he urged, grabbing Whitaker's shotgun. "Your men can't hold them off for long." "Not yet." Millicent kept her derringer trained on Whitaker, who had frozen in place. "Mr. Whitaker, you're going to sign a document of your own, a confession about the arson and cattle rustling, and an agreement to cease all attempts to acquire our land." "You're insane," Whitaker spluttered. "I'll do no such thing." "Then I'll let my men know they should search your property thoroughly," she replied coolly. I'm certain they'll find evidence linking you to these crimes, perhaps even in this very office." The standoff continued for several tense moments until Whitaker, seeing the determination in Millicent's eyes and hearing the continued commotion outside, finally relented. Under Finn's watchful eye, he penned a brief confession and signed it. "This means nothing," Whitaker growled as Millicent folded the paper and tucked it into her jacket. "No one will believe it was anything but coerced." "Perhaps," Finn acknowledged, "but it'll be enough to interest the territorial marshal. And I suspect once they start looking into your operations, they'll find plenty more to concern them." With the confession secured, they made their escape through a back entrance, finding Millicent's ranch hands engaged in a standoff with Whitaker's men. Their appearance, armed and clearly in control, shifted the balance. Within moments, they were mounting horses Finn behind Millicent on Penny and galloping away from the Whitaker ranch. They rode hard through the night, not slowing until they were safely back on Hayes land. The ranch hands cheered their return, especially when Millicent revealed Whitaker's signed confession. "What happened in Helena?" Millicent asked Finn once they had a moment alone. "How did they capture you?" Finn grimaced. "Ambush at Beaver Creek Crossing, 6 of them against Edgar and me. They shot Edgar's horse out from under him. He's got a broken leg but managed to hide in the brush. They took me, figuring I was more valuable as leverage. And my father never made it that far," Finn admitted. "But with Whitaker's confession, we have what we need. Tomorrow I'll ride to the county seat directly, bypass Helena altogether. The confession plus the rustler we captured should be enough to get the sheriff to act, regardless of his allegiances." Millicent nodded, relief washing over her now that the immediate danger had passed. Only then did she notice the blood soaking through Finn's shirt sleeve. "You're hurt." She reached for his arm, but he pulled back. "It's nothing, bullet just grazed me during the escape." Despite his protests, she insisted on tending to the wound herself. In the privacy of the kitchen, she carefully cleaned and bandaged his arm, her fingers gentle against his skin. "I thought I'd lost you," she admitted quietly, not meeting his eyes. "When that man said they had captured you." Finn's good hand came up to cup her cheek, turning her face toward his. "I promised I'd come back," he reminded her softly. "Though I admit I expected to be the one doing the rescuing, not the other way around." Millicent smiled through the tears that had unexpectedly formed. "We rescued each other, I think." The moment stretched between them, charged with emotion. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Finn leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, but when Millicent responded, wrapping her arms carefully around his neck, the kiss deepened into something passionate and certain. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Finn pressed his forehead against hers. "I've known you less than a week," he murmured, "yet I can't imagine my life without you in it." "Then don't," she replied simply. The next morning, true to his word, Finn rode for the county seat with Whitaker's confession and the captured rustler. He returned 3 days later with not only the sheriff, but also 2 territorial marshals, and to Millicent's delight, her father. Thomas Hayes was a stern man, not given to displays of emotion, but he embraced his daughter fiercely upon his return. When Millicent introduced Finn and explained all that had transpired, Thomas's handshake was firm and genuine. "Seems I owe you a debt I can never repay," he told Finn. "My daughter is everything to me." "She's quite remarkable," Finn agreed, his eyes meeting Millicent's across the room. "Saved my life, in fact." "After you saved mine," she reminded him with a smile. The marshals arrested Jeremiah Whitaker the following day, along with Burke and several of his men. The evidence, combined with testimony from the captured rustler who turned state's evidence, was overwhelming. Whitaker's empire began to crumble as more of his illegal activities came to light. As summer turned to fall, Finn remained at the Hayes ranch, helping rebuild the burned barn and taking on increasingly important responsibilities. His expertise and work ethic impressed Thomas, but it was the way he looked at Millicent that ultimately convinced the older man to give his blessing when Finn formally asked for her hand in marriage. They were wed in the newly constructed barn on a crisp October day, with wildflowers adorning every beam and the entire community in attendance. Even Edgar, still recovering from his broken leg, stood as Finn's best man. As they exchanged vows, Millicent couldn't help but remember their first meeting, her terror as flames surrounded her, and the sight of Finn emerging through the smoke to carry her to safety. From those desperate moments had grown a love neither had expected but both now cherished above all else. Their life together flourished along with the Hayes ranch. When Thomas eventually retired to a small house in town, Millicent and Finn took over operations completely, expanding the property and establishing one of the most respected cattle operations in the territory. They raised 3 children, 2 daughters, and a son, teaching them the value of hard work, integrity, and courage in the face of adversity. And each year, on the anniversary of the barn fire, Finn would present Millicent with a single wildflower, a reminder of how their love had bloomed from the ashes of destruction, and how sometimes the greatest blessings arrive in the midst of our darkest moments. "I'm still carrying you through the flames," Finn would whisper as they watched the sun set over their land. And Millicent would smile, knowing it was true. They carried each other, through fire and storm, through joy and sorrow, their love an enduring flame that neither time nor trouble could extinguish.